Lots of things stifle innovation. And that leads me to my next question, which is a combined question. So we're going to talk about how the Schwab-TD merger creates opportunities. And by definition, when the firms get larger, they have a harder time innovating because they're just too big and they have too much legacy business. And also your decision to switch your custodian partner to Apex. So can you talk about those two things sort of in a group there?
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of working backwards here. So on the clearing side, whenever you start a company like Altruist, I think there's essentially like 3 layers of like the clearing and custody relationship. So for those again who don't know, most people just think, well, I work with Fidelity, and it's like, but they don't realize if they unpacked Fidelity, there'd be kind of 3 components, right? So you have a broker dealer component, you have a clearing firm component, and then you have a custody component, right? So these 3 kind of pieces. And if you're a startup, you'd be, I think, a bit crazy to say, I'm going to build all 3 of these things all out of the box all at once. That would be like, probably a $50 million, 5-year build. So just way too high risk, before ever finding out if you have product market fit, which is why you don't see people doing it, right? There's only been a couple of firms that have built full self-clearing in the last, 20, 30 years, Robinhood and Vanguard. So that means you have to have a great clearing partner. And there's a lot of good clearing and custody partners out there. You can actually, someone could have launched like us with Pershing, like we could have launched with RBC. We could have launched with Apex. We could have launched with Drive Wealth, right? We initially built our platform with Drive Wealth as our clearing partner. And I will say that Drive has a really elegant API architecture. We had a great experience working with them. I would say it's no fault of their own that we had to move on. I think that they have a really bright future. But one of the things that they ran into, and this is like the politics of finance, is they were only at the clearing layer, right? So as I said, there's a broker dealer, clearing partner, custody partner. They were actually using a vendor for custody. That vendor got bought by a company called Peak Six. Peak Six is the parent company of Apex Clearing. You can probably imagine that they didn't really want to be helping one of their competitors with the back-end custody. And so Drive had to go find a new custody partner, and that just delayed their ability to ship certain features that we needed right away. Like for example, like a trust account was going to be 6 months later on the roadmap because they had to go do a whole new integration with a custody partner. I have no doubt they'll figure it out and they'll be a force to be reckoned with down the road. But they just aren't there today, right? At least in the advisor channel space, there's too much complexity in terms of account types and security types you need to support day one to help advisors. And they were going to be, a ways down the road before they could. Apex, on the other hand, has been around for a while, longer than people realize, going back to their Penson days. They have a lot of, sort of infrastructure that is easy to plug into. It's not as easy as people think. It's not turnkey. You still need to have a pretty good size engineering team and really know what you're doing and have a decent budget. But those were all things that we checked the boxes on. I really appreciate how good of a partner they've been, because we came to them and did a lightning fast, like 6-month integration, probably one of the fastest B2B integrations they've ever done, if not the fastest. And they've been a great partner since we launched. So that was kind of the backstory, right? The inside baseball. How did we end up with Apex? I've always have liked them. I've done integration with them before in a past company. We thought we'd try the new kids on the block in Drive Wealth. And again, they were great, but just didn't quite have the sophistication to serve advisors. Now, the interesting reason when I took that backwards is this just underscores, right, like the politics sometimes, of financial services. I don't know what will happen with Schwab and TD Ameritrade. I'm sure eventually it'll be something that we look back on and we won't really think like that it was a difficult integration. I think 5 years from now we'll look back and go, oh yeah, we just know Schwab and we kind of remember the old TD days, but it won't be like this. It's front and center as it is today. That being said, like they've got a tough next year, and plus probably a year and a half, 2 years, maybe even just integrating those two businesses, much less the actual clearing and custody platforms. Platform integrations are hard. And for anyone who doesn't know, I mean, like my last RIA merged with another large RIA. just two multi-billion-dollar RAs trying to put all their systems and pieces together. And I'm sure you know this from a lot of consulting projects. They're hard. Like they take, you have to have a plan. You're talking 12 plus months, even for, again, just putting two meaningful RIAs together, to putting two huge custodians with retail businesses and institutional businesses and asset management business and banking charters. It's a big, big, big project. So I think that, for a while, they're going to be heavily focused on that, as they should. That's got to be their core. And advisors, are already feeling a little bit of that because you just, and this isn't like, fairness with anybody. I mean, Schwab and TD are doing the right things by, really working their integration plan. And advisors, rightfully so, if they're frustrated with maybe it's bad service or difficulty in a phone queue or whatever it might be, can totally understand why they might be frustrated. But I will say, for us, that was never, I started this company before that happened, this wasn't like in response to Schwabi-trade, it's just sort of like, this is a thing that occurred in the past 2.5 years. And I think it certainly gets advisors thinking, if nothing else, right? I don't know that a lot of people are necessarily going to change. I mean, some will, some won't. I think there'll be certainly a lot of frustration expressed, in social media and, conversations advisors have with each other and things like that. But I don't think, that it's going to result in like this mass exodus of advisors, to be frank. I think most people will stay put. It'll be a difficult maybe year or so, but certainly there's people exploring, right? And we're a benefactor of that, as are other sort of custody alternatives. And interestingly, the kind of story that's not told as much is this has also affected Fidelity. Fidelity, I think, has had to think about their business, because it was one thing to compete with Schwab and TD separately and to be the clear, a clear number two, kind of like in the Schwab, Fidelity, TD kind of big three. Now they're obviously cemented at number two for a while, but they have a much bigger kind of, player sitting next to them, and one that is very diversified like they are. Whereas TD, had a much more kind of, I'd say like independent business model. Whereas, Fidelity's and Schwab's look a lot alike. Whereas TD was always kind of the outlier in that crew. So it's made Fidelity, I think, rethink how they do business, which has actually created opportunity even there, in terms of like their service model and their pricing models and the way that they're actually taking care of advisors. And on top of all of that, the 0% interest rate world has affected all three of them quite a bit, actually, more than people realize. This is then making it much more difficult for them to continue doing things like soft dollars, which I mentioned earlier. So we're seeing soft dollars get yanked in a lot of cases, or significantly modified, most cases being fully taken away. So now RIAs are sitting there going, boy, I'm going to have to pay for a lot of these things out of pocket. And they're paying a lot more attention to their technology decisions, right, than they were before. So it's interesting, how the sort of butterfly effect, if you will, of not just that merger, but all these other things happening, combined COVID, a global pandemic in the mix. And it's definitely created a really unique time for anybody offering better solutions to advisors. In other words, it's an extraordinary opportunity, great time to be in this business, I believe.